Hello and welcome to another album review. Today we'll be going over Opeth's Blackwater Park. Opeth is one of those bands that everybody loves and hates. A buddy of mine recently asked me to do a review of Blackwater Park, their so-called seminal piece. I didn't actually start with Blackwater Park. I had a weird phase in Opeth's career. I had bought Deliverance was actually my first album. They actually got me really hooked on them. And then I had wandered into a record store back in the day. Opeth's stuff was really hard to find, let me tell you, in the early 2000s. And I had picked up My Arms Your Hearst, which I thought was the most amazing album ever. I still put on that album to this day, and as a concept album, it's just so utterly brilliant. I had then purchased Orchid, which was their first album, and it's definitely a different piece. And then I had purchased Blackwater Park. After listening to the other four albums, I kind of felt as though Blackwater Park was maybe underwhelming to me at first. Only for the simple fact, Deliverance has these very long song structures, and so does My Arms Rehearsed. And then Orchid, they were really pushing them with how long songs could be. But I will tell you this about Deliverance. Deliverance is one of those albums where I believe Michael Augerfeld had felt the need to tighten up on Opeth's sound. Even though there are long songs and there are slow songs, there's actually, kind of tidbits of what would come with the double album release of Deliverance and Damnation. Damnation had more of these, moody blues, Jethro Tull influences all throughout. And Deliverance was more of like, as far as I'm concerned, the swan song as far as the death metal went. But Blackwater Park seemed to have both elements, down pat. The songs are very well written, and not only that, but I believe that the guitars, the riffs that they were coming up with were not strictly death metal. It was more of a proggy edge added in with their death metal, but not in a way that you would come off thinking that it was cynic. It's so over the top that you weren't going to get into it. It was more like these amazingly mid-tempo songs that had such an epic quality to them. And when you look at the time, a lot of bands that were getting popular around that time were like Amon Amarth and Dream Theater, I believe, was right around the time they had come out with Scenes from Memory. So progressive rock was really gaining an edge. I think Steve Wilson also was the one that produced this album. If anybody knows anything about Steve Wilson from Porcupine Tree, he really brought Opeth into this progressive rock arena, I think, especially with the production on Blackwater Park. And then I believe he was an engineer on Deliverance and then a producer on Damnation. And the sound effects, because there's a lot of different things going on, I believe, he really was like the Alan Parsons to Opeth and kind of made Blackwater Park their a version of Dark Side of the Moon. They kind of had this underground following, but to bring them into, this wider progressive rock, progressive extreme metal kind of thing, he was the one, I believe, that kind of tuned them in and made it something brilliant. Blackwater Park, for what it's worth, is a brilliant album and definitely maybe their masterpiece. But at the same time, I believe what kind of drew away from it from me was, you could tell that they were moving into that separate entity or separate genre, in which they would take away the death metal vocals and everything. It was their it was kind of like a band hitting 30. You know, they no longer wanted to push the envelope quite as much, even though they would do it with Deliverance. I feel like maybe, you know, to mirror one another, Deliverance and Blackwater Park kind of would be in that category, you know, as far as, you know, it was the end of one stage of Opeth. So I kind of hold it against Deliverance in that way. As far as, you know, if you wanted to jump into Opeth for the first time, Deliverance would probably be a great starting point for you, as opposed to Deliverance or My Arms Rehearsed, because I believe that the songs and the overall writing and abrasiveness of those albums might be a deterrent for some people, you know, especially My Arms Rehearsed. You know, you're going into a concept album that is not only long in its song structures, but it's totally different than what you would find on Blackwater Park. Especially with songs like Ivy and you know, stuff like that. You know, I mean, Michael Augerfeld has such a beautiful voice as far as clean, and I believe too, like as far as his death metal growls on Blackwater Park, you know, they're very audible. You know, you could pick out every word. It's never slurred so much that you don't get it. You know, this isn't, you know, a grindcore band where you're hearing mostly pig squeals and craziness. You know, Opeth has always been the kind of band where they wanted to deliver their RTU in a form where you were going to understand it, which is why every vocal is so easily brought out, especially if it's screamed or everything. The thing that I find with Blackwater Park is that they melded all their influences, you know, on the last album. It's, you know, if you look at the progression of Orchid, Morning Grace, My Arms Rehearsed, Still Life, and stuff like that, you know, it definitely comes into fruition that Blackwater Park would be the album that would finally, you know, take this wide spectrum and push it together into a complete package. Back in the day when they actually released the vinyl, it was on 2 LPs. You know, the CD itself's on 1. It's been reissued many times. But for me personally, I feel as though Blackwater Park was not their masterpiece. I feel as though My Arms Rehearsed was their masterpiece. But for many out there that probably, you know, found Opeth through Blackwater Park, it's probably to them that it is a masterpiece. I'm not detracting away from the actual album. What I am saying, though, is if you're going to get into Opeth, that would probably be the album to go with. But if you want more and you like that progressive side, you like the death metal side, and you like, you know, all these crazy acoustics and effects and the amazing drumming, you know, that just weaves and turns, I would definitely go with some of the earlier stuff. If you like the clean of Opeth, definitely pick up, you know, Damnation, which was their first all clean album. Watershed would come out a little bit after that, which was a pretty good album. Ghost Reveries was okay, and then their latest album was actually pretty well produced. And if you like the production and songwriting of Steve Wilson, I would definitely go and pick up the folk rock album, which Augerfeld and Wilson had produced. It's called Storm Corrosion, which is a great album. I think like every 3 or 4 years they really get together and make like a trilogy of albums. You know, I think it started with me personally. I think their first trilogy kind of started with Damnation, Fear of a Blank Planet, and then Steve Wilson's first solo album, Insurgentes. And then, you know, the latest trilogy from them, you know, obviously was Opeth's last album, Storm Corrosion, and then Steve Wilson's A Sparrow, Who Couldn't Sing. You know, so if you're into that side of prog, they are definitely the band to do it. But if you want to get into all three of those trilogies and really see where these guys started off as far as, you know, being together and making such amazing music, Damnation would be the start of all the Steve Wilson, Michael Lagerfeld collaborations, and would in turn mold what Opeth and Steve Wilson would become in the future. I think Damnation especially was the point in which, you know, Steve Wilson kind of moved away from doing Porcupine Tree too, you know, and getting in the producer chair. I mean, he eventually went on to do tons of albums and remasters, and I think he's done the last two Ian Anderson releases that, you know, if you know Ian Anderson, he's from Jethro Tull. So, all in all, if you want to get into Opeth, definitely check out Blackwater Park. It's one of their better albums. You know, there are some lower notes, you know, as far as Ghost Reveries. If you like that, I'm sorry, but it's true. So, if you have any comments, please leave them in the comment box below. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and share our videos. And we hope to hear from you all soon. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.